In the year 2020, we as a country have printed over 20% of all dollars in circulation. Again, that's over 20% in just the year of 2020 alone. Now, with money being printed off towards stimulus now totaling $5.4 trillion, many individuals are rightfully skeptical and asking questions whether or not this will cause major inflation. And of course, major inflation may just very well lead to a lot of consequences that may damage and destroy our economy. But considering the inflation rate the last 10 years has been pretty well modest, with 2020 and 2021 giving us annual averages of not even over 1.5%, others are considering inflation to be actually a positive aspect towards our economy. So in this video, we'll be addressing whether or not this new stimulus will have any major effect on inflation. Hey guys, Daniel here, one half of the Clock Brothers, and in this video we're going to be talking about whether or not the new stimulus program being issued out is going to have any major effect on inflation. Now, equally important, we're also going to address whether or not any inflation at all is going to be helpful for our economy. And just so there's clarity in terms of what we're talking about with inflation, the textbook definition of inflation, according to Investopedia, is a general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. So long story short, it's not necessarily meaning that more money being printed. It just means the purchasing power of the single dollar. Now, having said that, guys, do me a favor by inflating that like button, by smashing the like button. It really helps us out with our YouTube algorithm and get this video out to as many people as possible. Okay, so now that that bad joke is over and done with, let's bring up what people are actually concerned about, which is hyperinflation. Now, hyperinflation is when there's more than a 50% increase in terms of goods and services in relation to the purchasing power of a single dollar. So for example, if the cost of groceries are $100 a week, a hyperinflated scenario would be that 3 months later, the same groceries would actually cost $150 per week as opposed to $100 a week. Now, most people fear what happened with Zimbabwe, which at one point people had to carry wheelbarrows full of cash to buy groceries for the week, may actually end up happening to us, which, by the way, what happened with Zimbabwe is hyperinflation at its finest. Or Venezuela, where inflation got so out of control that they saw record highs in crime rates, rioting, and looting. There were extreme food shortages across the country, and well, millions of Venezuelan children actually ended up leaving the education system. Now that, my friends, is what we call stagflation at its finest, which, by the way, according to Investopedia, is defined as persistent high inflation combined with high unemployment and stagnant demand in the country's economy. Now, let me explain to you why I believe stagflation and also what happened with Venezuela is most likely not going to happen with the United States, because, well, if you look into the actual details of what happened, we can see that the biggest downfall for Venezuela's economy was the fact that all that inflation and all the printing of money, it never went towards means of production to create a sustainable economy for the people. Matter of fact, all the inflation and all the money being printed went towards more so social programs and cooperative initiatives that never created any sustainability for the economy. In other words, they ran a democratic socialist economy in which it was great for the people, but horrible for the economy, and actually setting up something that was sustainable and long-term. And it got to the point where they actually went beyond printing and they started borrowing money from other countries to continue their social programs and co-op initiatives. And well, a lot of individuals have stated, looking at Venezuela's case study, that many politicians and leaders, including and mainly Hugo Chavez, continued to do this despite warnings as early as 2011 and 2012, because they wanted to continue to win the votes of the Venezuelan people. But regardless, the results of it was that Venezuela at one point had one of the best and highest GDPs in the Western world. And now today in 2021, they actually have one of the worst, with, again, as we mentioned earlier in this video, with record highs in crime rates, rioting and looting, and millions of Venezuelan children out of the education system. Now, having said that, let's look at our side of the table with the US economy and why I believe that major inflation will most likely not happen. And additionally, why we most likely will not go down the same path as Venezuela did. Because yes, although we printed trillions and trillions of dollars towards stimulus programs, a lot of that indeed did go towards means of production and supporting enterprise, such as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL, and also the Paycheck Protection Program, aka the PPP, which Sam made tons of videos about. Now, having said that, a lot of stimulus that did not go towards means of production and enterprise were more so temporary and not permanent. And point number 2, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the inflation rate has been well maintained the last 20 years. The highest we've seen the inflation rate, as a matter of fact, was 2008 when we saw the annual rate at 3.8%. So overall, to answer the question, I don't believe that the new stimulus will cause any major problems to inflation where the cost of goods and services will permanently rise significantly. But I do believe that considering the trend of our political culture, we actually might be headed towards that direction. Now, at this point, it's extremely important to note that inflation is not the only thing that dictates the cost of goods and services in our US domestic economy. There's also monetary and fiscal policy, meaning that me and you, we're gonna have to continue to pay attention to what happens with the federal interest rate, with reserve requirements in the central banking system, and also open market operations, which, by the way, speaking of, starting December, the Fed announced, and they are continuing to right now, input it and buy $120 billion worth of bonds every single month until they see some improvement with unemployment numbers and also different demographics in their ability to obtain stable income. So in order for our economy to remain healthy, I do believe that we need to carefully monitor the inflationary rate, and alongside that, we need to adjust monetary policy accordingly. Because, well, if inflation continues to rise with no sign of stopping, I do believe the best move would be for the Fed to increase the rate slowly, along with increasing reserve requirements in the central banking system, along with slowing down open market operations by, in turn, slowing down the purchasing of bonds and treasuries. Overall, guys, I believe this new stimulus won't cause any major inflation. As a matter of fact, I believe as long as we keep our inflationary rate below or at 3% modestly, that will actually be pretty decently healthy for our economy. Now, having said that, we cannot have inflation go to the point where it's going to cause major asset bubbles, as we saw in the 1970s and also in the early 2000s, which led ultimately towards the Great Recession. And considering our markets are already artificially boosted across the board, negligence in inflation could lead to significantly worse consequences than we've ever seen before in our country. So having said that, I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. What do you guys think about all this? Do you think that the new stimulus will cause major inflation? Do you think inflation is what we need right now for our economy to stay stable? Do you think that the US could one day even be like Venezuela with democratic socialist tendencies in our economy? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And of course, guys, don't forget to like this video. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm and getting this information out to as many people as possible. And while you're at it, if you're feeling extra generous, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click on that notification bell. Now, for more daily content, go follow our Instagram at the Kwok Brothers. My personal Instagram is at the Daniel Kwok. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.